Whenever they step out together at a public event, it's evident that Princess Catherine and Princess Charlotte have a tight relationship. As they rode together in a carriage during Trooping the Color on June 14, 2025, that closeness between mother and daughter was as clear as day.
Has the relationship between Queen Camilla and Princess Catherine taken a sour turn? Here's why a heated moment between the two at Queen Elizabeth II's funeral.
What happens when the crown weighs not just on the head, but on the heart? Can duty coexist with motherhood? And how far should a mother go when her child is made to feel small, especially inside the walls of the very family meant to protect her? The silence between the lines. This isn't a story about scandals splashed across tabloid covers.
The Monday morning headlines say it all. Prince Andrew's attempt to explain his friendship with accused trafficker Jeffrey Epstein backfiring.
It's about the quieter tensions, subtle slights, unspoken rivalries, and the long shadows cast by tradition. At the center of it all, Princess Catherine, Queen Camilla, and a little girl named Charlotte, who unknowingly became the heart of a conflict no royal title could soften. It started like any other carefully choreographed royal weekend, woven into the fabric of Windsor's long-standing traditions. Families gathered under gilded ceilings for a luncheon meant to honor Queen Camilla's recent charity efforts, a seemingly harmless event on the surface, but underneath, something was off. Catherine noticed it in Charlotte almost immediately. Her usually spirited daughter had gone unusually quiet. She wasn't sulking or upset, just subdued, blending into the backdrop instead of standing tall in the room she belonged in. As was customary, the children were placed together in a side salon, a space just formal enough for polite behavior, but relaxed enough to let them be themselves. Catherine, always attentive, helped Charlotte settle in and gave her a soft kiss before stepping away. Everything seemed normal, but less than an hour later, Catherine spotted her daughter walking alone down the corridor. Her face wasn't tear-streaked, but her expression spoke volumes, pale, withdrawn, as if something inside her had closed up. When Catherine reached her, she found Charlotte standing stiffly near a service door. She asked gently what was wrong. Charlotte hesitated before saying, "Granny Camilla told me not to speak unless I was spoken to. I was just playing a guessing game with Louis." That was all it took. A harmless child's game had been interpreted as showing off, and Charlotte had been told to quiet down. Catherine held her daughter close, a soft embrace masking the storm rising within her. Camilla had always been tactful, careful with her public image, and usually polite. But Catherine had seen it before, remarks cloaked in gentility, digs disguised as etiquette. She'd just never expected it to fall on her children. Later, during the family garden walk, Camilla laughed easily with Charles while Charlotte clung closer to her mother. As tea was served, another comment landed like a needle. Charlotte reached for a second scone, and Camilla quipped, "Perhaps one is enough, darling. We wouldn't want to appear greedy," said with a smile, but the damage was done. Catherine saw the flicker in her daughter's eyes. These weren't isolated moments anymore. They were patterns. By the time the families regrouped indoors, Catherine had made a decision. She wouldn't let this slide. Inside one of the formal sitting rooms, the children joined the adults briefly before bedtime. Charlotte, trying to regain her confidence, asked Camilla if she could play the piano. The answer came quick and sharp, though spoken softly enough to escape most ears. "Why don't you sit still like a proper young lady?" Catherine was nearby. She heard every word, and though she didn't react right away, the look she gave Camilla said everything. It was no longer about etiquette. It was about respect. A few hours later, back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine tucked Charlotte in herself. When asked if she was all right, Charlotte replied honestly, "Granny Camilla doesn't like when I talk too much." That night, Catherine sat across from William and told him what had happened, not with fury, but with clarity. William didn't argue. He knew when his wife spoke like this, it was serious. "This can't keep happening," she said, and he agreed. The next morning, Charlotte stayed home from a royal children's event organized by Camilla. The reason was disguised as a minor cold, but in truth, Catherine wasn't willing to put her daughter in that position again. Word trickled back to Camilla, who reportedly muttered something about too delicate for a bit of mud. But that wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Shifting grounds at Highgrove.
We're going to turn now to a look at King Charles' private estate in the English countryside, Highgrove House, where His Majesty personally designed the gardens with a focus on being sustainable and eco-friendly.
The following weekend brought another gathering, this time a quieter dinner at Highgrove, hosted by Charles. The grand estate, with its sprawling gardens and timeless charm, was often a refuge from the relentless spotlight of public life. But this evening felt different. There was a tension beneath the polished surface, a silent current pulling at the edges of the family's fragile unity. The goal was simple on paper: spend time as a family, ease the strain that had been simmering beneath the surface, and plan future appearances where they could present a united front to the world. Catherine and William arrived with the children in tow, their presence a steadying force amid the undercurrents. Charlotte, dressed neatly in a soft blue dress that matched her calm demeanor, went to greet her grandfather before bedtime. Her steps were careful, polite, her smile practiced to perfection. A young girl doing her part to keep peace in a household where subtle battles often played out in silence. When Charlotte politely said hello to Camilla, the queen consort barely glanced her way. The dismissal was so faint it might have been missed, except for what came next. Camilla's voice, dripping with a sharpness that cut through the gentle hum of conversation, said, "Are you sure you're not too tired to be here?" Everyone in the room heard it. Charlotte didn't cry, though the sting was clear in the slight falter of her posture. Catherine's face, calm but steeled with quiet resolve, shifted imperceptibly. In that instant, she understood the line had been crossed. Not for the first time, but definitively. With the tender authority of a mother fiercely protective of her child,
"It can be tough being the daughter of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, not least of which because your life is very public. Sometimes it's nice when your mom has some helpful advice. Here are the sweet words Kate said to Charlotte at Philip's memorial."
Catherine instructed Charlotte to say goodnight to her grandfather and go upstairs with the nanny. Once the door closed behind her daughter, Catherine's voice, low but unwavering, filled the room. She's not too sensitive. She's a child, and she deserves to be spoken to with kindness. Camilla's carefully maintained smile flickered and faded. She tried to play it off, attempting to cast her remark as concern for Charlotte's bedtime routine or the fatigue of a long day. But Catherine didn't let it go. "It's not just tonight," she said, her eyes meeting Camilla's without wavering. "I've seen this happen before, and so has she." The room was silent, except for the faint rustle of napkins and the distant ticking of a grandfather clock. William, who had remained quiet until now, finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm, his loyalty undeniable. When Catherine laid out the small jabs, the dismissive comments, the coldness that was directed only at Charlotte, William's support was absolute. Camilla turned toward Charles, clearly expecting him to intervene, but the king remained quiet, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His silence spoke volumes. He understood what this was. Not a trivial overreaction, but a mother drawing a clear, unyielding boundary. And once Catherine drew that line, there was no walking it back. The tension lingered as the evening wore on. The gathering, meant to be a peaceful family moment, had instead become a crossroads, a quiet but undeniable fracture in the royal facade. Later that night, as Catherine sat beside Charlotte's bed again, the softness returned. But there were no probing questions, no need to dissect the moment. Instead, Catherine spoke gently. "You were polite. You were kind. And that's all I'll ever ask of you." Charlotte looked up with tired eyes, her whisper barely audible. "I tried." Catherine's reply was steady and filled with motherly reassurance. You don't have to try to be perfect. You just have to be you. In that quiet exchange, the dynamic shifted irreversibly. It was a promise of protection, a pledge that Charlotte's worth would never be measured by the approval of those who refused to see her. The following days marked a subtle but significant change. Camilla was not invited to Charlotte's school recital the next week. Officially, the press release cited a scheduling conflict, but palace insiders understood the unspoken message loud and clear. Respect was no longer negotiable. Catherine had drawn a line in the sand, and she was not afraid to make it known. Behind closed doors, this decision sent ripples through the palace. Camilla's team scrambled to spin the narrative, but the reality was unmistakable. The balance of power was tilting. Catherine's unwavering defense of her daughter was a statement far greater than the simple exclusion from a recital. It was a declaration that the old rules, where silences could be weaponized and kindness was optional, would no longer govern their family. William stood firmly by Catherine's side, his own frustration simmering beneath his composed exterior. He had witnessed too many moments where Charlotte was made to feel less than, and now, with Catherine's unyielding support, he was ready to confront the subtle cruelties that had long been tolerated. The household staff noticed, too. Whispers circulated in the corridors about a newfound confidence in Catherine, a strength that had been quietly building for months. She was no longer the royal consort defined by tradition and protocol. She was a mother who would fiercely guard her children's dignity, even if it meant unsettling the palace's delicate equilibrium. For Charlotte, the world suddenly felt a little safer. The sharp edges of cold glances and veiled remarks dulled in the face of her mother's protection. She still faced challenges, but now she faced them knowing she was not alone. And Catherine, in her gentle but unwavering way, was reshaping the family narrative, one act of kindness, one boundary drawn at a time. As the moonlight filtered through the curtains that night, Catherine sat watching Charlotte sleep, her heart heavy but resolute. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she would never let anyone diminish her daughter's light again. Not now, not ever. The queen without a crown. Summer at Balmoral was traditionally a time for healing, a retreat from royal pressures, tucked away in the misty stillness of the Scottish Highlands. But that year, as the royal family gathered, the peace felt strained. What should have been a tranquil reunion turned into a quiet battleground of power, dignity, and motherhood. Charlotte arrived with her usual grace, hand in hand with Catherine. William followed with George and Louis, each child more aware than ever of the dynamics at play. Catherine had prepared them not with warnings, but with warmth. "You're not just royal," she had told Charlotte. "You're kind. That's your strength." But Balmoral wasn't kind, at least not this time. Camilla had arrived early, bringing her own circle of guests, friends from her country set, allies from years of maneuvering within royal circles. She had been queen consort for over a year now, but the crown, in many ways, still felt heavy with insecurity. And seeing Catherine, poised and adored by the public, only deepened the rift. The tension rose subtly, a missed invitation here, a changed seating chart there. At one dinner, Camilla asked Charlotte to sit at a separate table with the younger children, despite the fact that George, who was only a year older, remained seated beside the adults. Catherine didn't argue. She simply moved with her daughter, taking her seat beside her at the children's table. A statement made with presence, not protest. In private, Camilla complained, "She's making everything about Charlotte. It's not how things are done." But it was how Catherine did things, and people were beginning to notice. The turning point. Words left unspoken. The moment everything shifted came on a rainy afternoon walk through the Balmoral grounds. The family was strolling along one of Queen Elizabeth's favorite wooded paths. Charlotte was collecting pebbles, Louis skipping behind her, and George chatting with William about a charity soccer match.
And Prince William tonight sending a message, announcing he will be in the crowd at London's Wembley Stadium tomorrow, attending the soccer match between England and France. The royal family tonight calling it a show of solidarity with the people of France.
Camilla approached Charlotte, gently at first, asking what she'd do when she was older. "Maybe something with animals," Charlotte said, smiling. Then Camilla replied, "Well, I hope you're not expecting the same spotlight as your brother." "That's not how it works, dear." She may have meant it as a joke, or perhaps not, but it didn't matter. Charlotte fell quiet, and Catherine, walking a few paces behind, heard every word. Later that evening, the atmosphere at dinner was frostbitten. Catherine said nothing to Camilla, but her absence at breakfast the next day said more than words could. She and the children stayed in their cottage wing, declining all group meals. Charles noticed. So did William, and so did the staff. It didn't take long for rumors to circle. "Something's changed," one aide told a royal correspondent. "There's distance now, and not just physical." Catherine wasn't pulling away from duty. She was pulling away from a dynamic that had asked her to stay silent, even when her daughter was being emotionally sidelined. The public knew nothing of the details, but they saw the aftershocks. Photos from Balmoral were released days later. In all the official portraits, Camilla stood with Charles. Catherine stood alone with her children. Behind palace walls. Back in London, the palace machinery stirred to life. Camilla's team began working overtime. Press releases, op-eds, planned interviews to highlight her modern grandmotherly role. But none of it landed. Because while Camilla was trying to rewrite the narrative, Catherine wasn't writing at all. She was living it. Every public appearance was subtle reinforcement of where the true royal center had shifted. Catherine and Charlotte at a literacy event. George and Louis volunteering with their father. No pageantry, just presence. Courtiers began whispering about an internal rebalancing. Some spoke of Catherine as the monarchy's emotional anchor. Others called her the queen in everything but title. And while Charles remained silent, Camilla grew more visibly tense. Then came the event that made the silence deafening. Charlotte was awarded a Youth Ambassador title from a charity focused on childhood resilience. It was Catherine's doing, quietly arranged, no fanfare. But the press caught wind, and the announcement made headlines. Charlotte, at just 10 years old, had taken on a role usually reserved for teenage royals. She delivered a brief message, pre-recorded, heartfelt, and poised. And who wasn't mentioned in the press release? The Queen Consort. A queen who watched it all. For Camilla, the unraveling was not a sudden collapse, but a slow, agonizing erosion, like a quiet storm wearing down the strongest walls. She had fought so hard for decades to be accepted, to stand beside Charles not just as his wife, but as a legitimate partner in the monarchy. Every step had been a battle, overcoming whispers, cold shoulders, and public skepticism. Now, all that painstakingly earned legitimacy felt as fragile as a sheet of paper fluttering in a harsh wind, especially when weighed against the undeniable authenticity radiating from a mother and her daughter. She vented her frustration to Charles behind closed doors, her voice sharp with resentment. She fumed in private meetings, where the courtiers carefully tread around the mounting tension. On more than one occasion, she was heard saying bitterly, "If she thinks she's raising the next queen, she should remember the line of succession." But it was never really about the line of succession anymore. It was about something far deeper, a matter of sentiment, trust, and the genuine connections that no royal decree could mandate. The monarchy was evolving. It was no longer ruled solely by bloodlines and tradition. It was being shaped by the trust and affection of the public. And in that silent, invisible vote of confidence, the people had made their choice clear. The queen they watched in the eyes of Charlotte and Catherine was one born of empathy, kindness, and genuine care, not of entitlement or obligation. Queen Elizabeth II, with her lifelong wisdom, had once said, "The crown must always move forward." she likely foresaw this moment, not one of scandal or chaos, but one of quiet evolution and transformation within the monarchy's walls. Change was inevitable, and this was the subtle but profound shift the institution was undergoing. Camilla's world grew smaller in response. Where once she moved with certainty, now she found herself increasingly isolated. The rooms where decisions were made felt colder, the eyes once deferential now measuring her with quiet skepticism. Her health became a convenient explanation for her stepping back from certain public duties.
In August 2023, Queen Camilla was spotted with visibly shaky hands, drawing concern from the public. It wasn't the first time her health made news.
But those close to the palace knew it was far more than that. It was the slow retreat of influence, the silent concession that her place beside Charles was no longer the center of gravity it once was. The irony was cruel. Her fight to be accepted had succeeded in form, but in substance, the crown was no longer hers to command. She was watching as a new chapter unfolded, powerless to stop the rising tide of a different kind of monarchy. And beneath the calm she projected, there was pain, the bitter sting of watching history move forward without her at the helm. A new kind of monarchy. As Charlotte's public confidence blossomed, so too did the perception that she embodied something wholly new within the royal family. Gone were the days when royal children were simply symbols of duty and decorum, bound by invisible chains of protocol. Charlotte represented sincerity, an honest and approachable future monarch, raised to lead not by birthright alone, but by empathy and understanding. At the heart of this transformation stood Catherine, unshaken, steady, and deeply aware of the weight of every decision she made. Her composure was the quiet engine driving this shift. There were no public confrontations, no screaming headlines about palace feuds or royal drama. Instead, the change happened in subtle but unmistakable ways that only insiders truly noticed. Loyalty within the palace began to shift. Staff members who had long served Camilla quietly requested transfers to the Wales household, drawn by Catherine's warmth and modern approach. Commonwealth leaders, who had traditionally sought audiences with Charles and Camilla, increasingly asked to meet with Catherine and her children. The subtle message was clear: this was the future of the monarchy. Within internal meetings, William's voice grew stronger and carried more weight than ever before. His partnership with Catherine was not just a union of hearts, but a strategic alliance that reshaped palace dynamics. The balance of power was shifting, and William and Catherine were quietly steering the monarchy toward a new path. Even Princess Anne, once openly skeptical of Catherine's more contemporary approach to royal duties, began to soften. While she never spoke openly about her change of heart, senior aides noted a subtle shift in her demeanor and language. Where she had once been critical, she now referred to Charlotte as the real Windsor spirit, a significant endorsement from one of the monarchy's most traditional figures. Camilla, meanwhile, retreated further. Official statements cited health reasons for her reduced public appearances, but the truth was far more complex. Her influence had diminished quietly but inexorably, and she was painfully aware of the changing tides. The woman who had fought so long for acceptance was now sidelined by the very evolution she had struggled to be part of. This new kind of monarchy was not without its challenges. There were moments of uncertainty, of tension beneath the polished veneer. But it was unmistakably a monarchy moving forward, one that valued genuine connection, emotional intelligence, and the quiet strength of those who led with kindness and resolve. For Catherine and Charlotte, this was more than a shift in public perception. It was a reclamation of dignity and respect. The future they represented was not defined by the burdens of the past, but by the promise of a more authentic and empathetic reign. And as the monarchy adapted to the demands of a modern world, the quiet revolution unfolding within Highgrove was poised to shape the royal family's legacy for generations to come. Catherine never set out to rewrite the rules or storm the palace gates. She didn't need to. Her mission was simple: protect her child. But in doing so, she quietly reshaped the future of the entire royal family. Because true power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, in the small acts of courage, in the steady presence of a mother's love, in the moments that slip beneath the radar of flashing cameras and sensational headlines. It's in those silent, unshakable choices that legacies are truly made. Charlotte never had to raise her voice to be heard. She was raised to listen deeply and speak only when her words carried meaning, and when she did, the world couldn't help but lean in. As for Camilla, history will remember her, but not as the queen who defined the new era. Her chapter is closing, making way for a legacy far more enduring. That legacy belongs to someone else, not the loudest, not the oldest, not even the one who wears the crown, but to the mother who gave her daughter the courage to shine, and to that light, the one now illuminating the future of the monarchy.